Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. Let's say that you're on a mission to the supermarket and you have a well-defined list. So you have oranges, bananas, fresh coconut, chili powder, ice cream. That's all on your list. But are all of the above important? Technically, yes. No one usually goes shopping with a list of 5 items and ends up with just 1 or 2. But even as you scan the list, you know that it's not just a list, but there is a level of priority. For instance, the ice cream might not seem like a top priority to anyone else, but you know that there are kids back home and they have been promised that treat. So if you go back without that ice cream, well, let's just say it won't be a great outcome. In reality, that list, it's not just a list, but some of those things on the list are more interesting, more important, and of a higher priority than others. When writing a sales page, we too ponder over which issues will get the client's attention. And that's usually where we go off track, because we don't treat the issues as a priority list, but instead as a shopping list. And when we write that sales page, we feel that we have to put all those problems on the sales page, right at the top of the sales page. But if we go back to that analogy of the shopping list, we realize that there is a priority system, that the chili powder, the coconut, and all the fruit, that can wait because it's the priority that matters. Similarly, a sales page has to be assembled based on priority. The most significant problem, the one that shows up at the top of the sales page, is the biggest problem. That is the one that they want you to solve. That's the one you want to solve. And to get to that particular problem, we have to use the power of priority. And it's at this precise point that we run into a very peculiar hurdle. Instead of the client helping you, all they do is confuse you. Instead of giving you the one thing that they want to deal with most of all, they give you the entire shopping list. But there is a way out of this mess. So bear with me, because we need to go back a few steps and then figure out how we got into this mess in the first place. The reason why we got into this mess is because we were trying to confuse ourselves. And so let's go along with that exercise and let's confuse ourselves. The reason why we get all this confusion on our sales page is because we believe in traditional marketing, or this concept of avatar, which is to say that if you were to step into any marketing agency or advertising agency, what you'd end up with is a description of the client. And the description would read like this. The clients are corporate managers, they are leaders, they're in small and medium businesses, and they're approximately 40 years of age. They have a family income of $100K, they live in an urban area, and they grow onions in their backyard. Wait, did you think that growing onions in the backyard was a weird concept? If you did, then backtrack to all the points in that long sentence, because every single one of them, they're all weird. Let's say you're selling a course on negotiation. Onions don't have any relevance to the client. We're sure of that. But what about their family? What about their income? What about the fact that they earn $100K? What is that relevance? It has absolutely no relevance. Maybe, just maybe, the corporate manager concept is slightly useful, but the rest of it has little or no bearing on what you're going to sell. And all of this crazy, nonsensical description of family, dogs, income, and where they live, that isn't how a customer buys a computer. That's not how they buy a phone. That's not how they buy a holiday in Fiji or New Zealand. And if you're going to consider all of the above, then you may as well consider the onions and make a real big mess of things. But if you wanted to avoid the mess, then we'd do well to stop writing these silly descriptions. The way to understanding a client is to first start with the target audience. That first bit, the corporate manager, that gives you a place to look. Firstly, where would you meet that corporate manager? And once you know where you're going to meet that corporate manager, it takes you to the second level and the most important level of all, which is who. Who is this manager? When looking for the problem and the final solution, you have to be like an owl and ask who is that person? And the answer in this case might be a woman called Arundhati. Now, we've got rid of all the nonsensical information about the cats, the dogs, the onions, and this allows us to talk to a real person called Arundhati, who, without wanting to, causes a whole new level of confusion. And when you speak to her over the phone or in person, you tend to get something like this on the recording. And this is what she would say approximately. My problem is that I'm a new manager, I'm running a team, and I'm anxious about my new role because it's also a new company. I have a fear of making mistakes, and I'm a perfectionist. So there's this constant drive for perfection. I also have a bit of a history of being stressed. It's almost this recurring pattern of stress. This stress is compounded by the fact that I need people to like me, and hence I don't want to disappoint anyone. I also work long hours, which means that I can't take care of my family like I'd want to, and I don't have time to put aside for my health or well-being either. All of this makes me stressed and anxious, and I have this constant fear of failure. Did we spot the biggest problem in Arundhati's response? Of course not. While most clients might start tentatively, they quickly give you more information than you can handle. Buried in a single paragraph is this shopping list. It's only when we separate the elements do we sense the real magnitude of confusion. Here's what she said. New position as manager, new team, brand new company, fear of making mistakes, drive for perfection. Need people to like me, don't want to disappoint anyone. Work long hours, guilty about not taking care of family, no time for health, no time for well-being, constant fear of failure. That list, it read a lot like the one that we had created earlier. Oranges, bananas, fresh coconut, chili powder, ice cream. And just like the grocery list, we have to have a sense of priority and use all the elements on the list. Just because we're using priority doesn't mean that we're not going to buy the rest of the items. And similarly, all those fears and troubles that Arundhati has, well, they're all real, they're all essential, but priority means that you can't deal with all of them at once. And if you do, well, that's why most sales pages are such a hodgepodge. The way we go about prioritizing the list is to simply present the list back to the client. And because it's a real person and not some figment of some marketing agency's imagination, we can send across the list in an email. Then we can get the client to prioritize, but not numerically. Usually the tendency is to list the issues in a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of format, but that is numerical ranking, and it doesn't help our understanding of how important an issue might be. So how do we solve this problem? If you were to assign 10 imaginary pebbles to the client along with that list, then you'd get a non-fuzzy picture. So she might say, okay, my new position as a manager, I'll allocate 2 pebbles to that. My drive for perfection, 5 pebbles. Need for people to like me and not want to disappoint anyone, 2 pebbles. And then the constant fear of failure, 1 pebble. Did she just do that? Did she just drop her family and her health off the list? No, she didn't. Instead, she realized that it's the perfection that's causing the cascade of insanity. That while being a new manager was indeed a bit of a burden, it's the overwhelming need to be perfect. All of that is sucking up her time and her energy, which means we now have a priority. And that priority is bigger than everything else because it's taking up all of those pebbles. It's taking up 50% of her waking thoughts. And once we get that 50% in control, we've made a huge change in her life. And she's more than likely to have more time and energy for her family and her health. Prioritizing the biggest problem is the most important task of all. And the way we went about it was to get rid of the dogs, the cats, and the onions. And while we started out looking for managers, as in plural managers, not even one manager, but many managers, it's one person that we selected. That's what we realized, that we have to go, okay, this is the target audience. Let's get down to target profile. Target profile is this one person. Who's this one person? It's Arundhati. So we went from where do we find these people to who is that person? And at that point in time, she confused us. She gave us this huge shopping list. But we got her to choose what she needed, and we gave her a bunch of 10 pebbles. She allocated the pebbles, and we had a clear idea of what her problem was, and we could solve that problem. Or can we? What do we do next? We know that she needs to reduce the perfection, so should we just give her our solution? Should we just talk about our program? Should we tell her how it can help her? We will get to that point. That point is not right now. And there is a next stage, so let's find out how we go about that next stage. Now that we're clear about Arundhati's real problem, we have to go through a sort of second interview stage. She's identified that her drive for perfection is her primary downfall, and our job is to let her express how the perfection scenario starts to unfold. So we're telling her, tell us the story, tell us how all of this perfection is driving you crazy. And it's at this stage she's going to give you not only the problem, but the consequences of that problem. Like a movie, she'll start to tell you what happens, how it all happens, and all of this information is being recorded by you on tape, because the client will slip into this mode called the explainer mode. And the explainer mode is just like it sounds. She'll start to explain things. But while she's in this mode, she'll also use specific words, specific terms, and she will describe her situation in a completely different set of words that you're not expecting, all of which needs to be recorded and transcribed. But at some point, she will stop talking. At which point, you can ask if she's done. You can ask her if there's something more that she wants to add, and if there's anything that she wants to add, she will do so at this point. But if she's done, she'll be ready for the next part. And you can ask her, now that we have dealt with the problem, now that we have dealt with the consequences of that problem, what does the solution look like? And then again, she'll be off. She'll be off telling you how she sees the solution. And once again, she will slip into that explainer mode. And you need to keep that recording going, because yet again, she's going to explain how she sees her perfect world, or at least a world that's not so crippled by perfection. What we have here at this stage is pure magic for your sales page. But let's stop because we've covered quite a bit. Let's stop and figure out what happened. We realized right at the top that we didn't need this avatar. We didn't need all this crazy description of dog, cat, income, onions, all that stuff. We didn't need it at all. It was just muddling up the whole scenario by just adding to that description for no reason at all. And then we got to the client, and the client explained her problems, but she muddled it up. She gave you a shopping list of problems. And what we had to do was we had to put it in bullet points, go back to her, and then ask her which were the most important ones. And we couldn't have that done numerically. We had to give her a bunch of metaphorical pebbles or imaginary pebbles, and then she would allocate 5 for this and 3 for that, 2 for 1 for this, and so on. Once we knew what that problem was, we could ask her to describe it, and then she would go into this explainer mode and use precise words and emotions that would describe how she feels. And once she was done with that, we could ask her if there's anything more, and we could move to the solution. Again, in explainer mode all the time while you're recording. And that's kind of the summary of this entire podcast, but it still leaves us with 2 problems, 2 unresolved issues. And the first issue is, what about the rest of the problems in that list? Do we just throw them away? Do we just abandon them? And the second one is, we understand her problem, but where does our product or service come into play? So the first one, let's deal with the first one, which is, what about the rest of the problems in that list? Do we abandon them? Just like a shopping list, you don't need to get rid of the other items. If your client has come up with a dozen problems, you can very easily move them to another section. And this section is called the bullet points or bullets. Almost every sales page has bullet points, and what you can do is you can go and put in all those bullet points. And then what you've got is you've got a bunch of headlines sitting in the middle of your page, because that's what bullet points are. They're like headlines. You just write them in a different way. And to figure this out, just go to any of the Psychotactics sales pages and see how bullet points are written. But essentially, you're taking all these problems, putting them in the bullet points, you're not getting rid of them. And this takes us to the second point, which is, what about the product or service that we are selling? Where does that fit in? There's a good chance that your product or service already fixes most of the problems of the client. Maybe it doesn't fix every possible issue, but there's a good chance that it'll cover quite a few issues. The sequence of your sales page needs to flow like this: the biggest problem of the client, the description of that problem, the consequences that arise, the solution as the client sees it, and at this stage, it's time for your solution. So first we start off with the problem, we go to the consequences, we go to the solution, and this is just the problem, the consequences, the solution. And at that stage, you bring up your solution, your product, your service. As you've figured out, these series of steps aren't something that you can achieve in one afternoon. All of this might seem like an unnecessary detour, which is why it's so easy to sit at your desk, just like a marketing agency does, and instead of going through all of the steps, it's far easier to have a statement that reads like, the clients are corporate managers, leaders in small, medium-sized businesses, approximately 40 years of age with family income of 100K, live in an urban area, and grow onions in their backyard. It's also the reason why so many sales pages seem swappable, which is to say that you can almost take their sales page and put in yours, and it will still work. And if you take the shortcut, your sales page will still work, but it will take a lot more advertising, a lot more marketing dollars and energy to get that same impact. It's not like clients won't buy from your sales page, it's just that the messages will be so much more confusing and therefore cause a higher rate of bounce. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. And what have you learned so far? Well, let's do a very quick summary, but you know the summary. We go and we look at our target audience. We find that person. That's Arundhati. She confuses us like crazy. We reduce that confusion by segregating all the problems into bullet points, get her to choose those bullet points, not all of them, just one of them, by allocating pebbles. So she goes, these are 4 problems, these are 3 or 4 of my main problems, and you know the rest. You expand the problem, you expand the solution, you expand the consequences, and now you can bring in your stuff, bring in your product, your service, and that's what you need to do. So what's next? The one thing that you really need to do is you need to find out, who is this person? Who is this target profile? Who are you going to speak to? One person, not this generic avatar, not this fake thing that you have to make up. Find that one person, get this going, and you'll find it to be an experience like nothing else. It's just clients who've done this, they've resisted it for so long, and when they do it, they go, why did I wait so long? So don't wait so long, get it done. And with that, let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. First up is the headline course. That's the 13th of July. And it's the only live course for this year. We'll probably have some next year, but this is the last live course. If you've never been on a Psychotactics course, this is a good chance, because you'll not only learn how to write headlines and write them specifically, 8 different types of headlines in 10 minutes, but you will also see how we conduct the courses and how we filter out the groups. And there's a lot of learning that is behind the scenes, as it were, that you don't necessarily see on other courses because they just throw everybody together. But we go through a system, and one of the reasons why we get precise results is because of the system. So you'll get to see it, you'll get to experience, you'll get to be part of it. And that's like doing 2 courses in one, the headline course and learning about how the headline course or any course is conducted. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is the info products course. That's coming up on the 2nd of August, if that's what you're looking for. I'll give you more information about that later. And then we have a whole bunch. Uniqueness on the 20th of September. And finally, for those of you that are waiting for the article writing course, that comes up in October. So in August, we've got info products, then uniqueness, then article writing course. And we'll give you more notifications as we get closer to those dates. But for now, it's just a headline course. And that's approximately what's happening. Now, there are also products like black belt presentations, and all this while they've just been available. You could go in and get it at any point in time. They are going to be sold only once a year or twice a year and in limited numbers. So there you go. Scarcity is being put into place. Urgency is being put into place. If that's what you want, go to psychotactics.com, look for black belt presentations, and get your copy before it goes off the shelf. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. You've been wonderful to listen to this rather complex. It's simple, but still slightly harder way to get that precise message for your sales page. So try it out, because that's what gets results. A little extra hard work. That's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? It's Tuesday here in New Zealand, and it's any given Tuesday, of course, but last week I started writing and recording scripts for the podcast, and in that week, 1 week, I completed 4 of those podcasts. Now, to give you an understanding of what was happening in 2014, which is when this podcast started, it would take me all week to just complete 1 podcast, and that is with a lot of grumbling and a lot of, you know what I mean. It's just that frustration. And then after that, by the time we got to 2018, something happened. And I was still taking a week, but there was none of that dread. By the time we got to October of 2018, I was turning out a whole bunch of them at one go. And now, in this last week, it's been 6 podcasts, and I'm on track to recording 8. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because one of the factors is not really skill. What I'm finding is that, yes, you get to a point of skill, and then you still have the same skill, but you get this confidence factor, and it makes you kind of unstoppable. So if you say, well, I want to learn to write headlines, or I want to learn to write copy, or whatever you want to learn, you probably go through this stage of where you start off saying, I'm pretty hopeless at it, and then you just struggle a lot. And you get to the point where you've got mediocre skill and then great skill, and then at some point you go confidence. You've got confidence, and there is this inexplicable jump that happens. And then you go down the road and you get another burst of confidence, and then there's this massive jump. And it's not this stage by stage or step by step, but it's exponential. And if you've been struggling with something for a while, then what I would say is either get a good system yourself or find a teacher that can teach you that system, and keep going down the road, because you want to hit these exponential points. And frankly, it's a big relief because you're struggling and you really don't think you can make it, and then suddenly you hit these points. So we're talking about something quite abstract, confidence. And yet it happens, and the dread goes, and they get faster and faster and better at the same time, which is amazing. So if you're thinking of giving up, well, this message was for you. That's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. And we'll see you in 5000 BC, won't we? Bye-bye.